Thank you all so much for coming to CPAC. Myself and Becky are organisers of this conference, and I know from all of us, we just want to say a big thank you to all of you for coming here today. Now, we were talking earlier about this panel, and we were discussing notes, and we were saying that we think that this panel is probably one of the most important that we're talking about today. Because in the words of Whitney Houston, I believe the children are our future. So we need to ensure that when we are talking about our education system, when we are talking about children, we are actually teaching them for life, not just brainwashing them into socialist dogma. Now, we know that the socialists have done the long march through our institutions, and they have started with education, and they started with culture. Now, these are really important things that we on the right need to reclaim, and we need to stop vacating the pitch and actually get out there and talk about the issues that really matter to us. So I'd like to hand over to Becky to talk about how you think the socialists have done this. Why do you think they started with education? Because it's quite insidious that they started with our children.
Well, I think the first thing to say is, has been repeated many times in this conference so far, I think that a lot of the blame lies with actually all of us small c conservatives who have, in a way, taken our eye off the ball. I think those of us with children, I had, my oldest child is 24, and I think 20 years ago or so when, for example, iPads came into the classroom, I was very critical, and I was told I was being a reactionary for not liking it. I should have been a lot stronger then. Now we've got to a stage where we've realized the dangers of of these objects in our classrooms. Anyone knows that the people that make these phones do not allow their own children to be taught with them in the classroom. So in California, they don't let those phones in the classroom. Now, why would that be? It's taken us a long time to realize that. So that's the first thing. Of course, we all know that our children are coming home and saying things like, it's not okay to say that when they get back from a classroom. So we know that this is happening. And I think one of the things that we've got to do is make sure we understand what is being taught in schools. And we don't have to wait for a new government for this. I think we don't have to wait at all. Every parent can very easily go to their school. It's a very easy thing to do, and ask what's on the curriculum, ask what's being taught in their history lesson, ask which of the canon of books they are being given for GCSE, or at any stage, even in primary school. What is my child being taught? What are they being given to take home? And you can question that, and you can say, I don't want that book to be taught, or I don't want that course, I would like to have another topic. And if teachers are good teachers, they enjoy a conversation about it. So I think a lot can be done by all of us, by us as parents. But I would also say that, of course, three of my four grandparents were head teachers, and both of my parents were teachers. So in very recent time, lots of us, small c conservatives, became teachers. And I would argue, and I think it's a sad thing to have to admit, that lots of my generation who could have become teachers have not become teachers. And so we've left the void, and into the void have gone lots of people with views that perhaps we wouldn't want to have taught to our children. So I think there's a big sort of, if you like, the fault is also ours.
100%. Well, I want to pass over to Dame Andrea Jenkyns, who obviously has been an education minister, and understand and tell us a little bit about how government and what it's like in government, particularly with the NGOs and all of these insidious bodies who are pushing this absolutely horrific ideology on our children and in our institutions.
I mean, firstly, I believe it began in the Blair years. I mean, when I was a 70s and 80s kid at school, it was not like that. We had a sense of humour then, didn't we? And we could take the mickey out of each other, which I still do. But when I was in government, I was a skills minister under Boris and Liz, and I was responsible for apprenticeships, FE, HE, and at the time I was an MP, and I had so many people write to me, disgusted at the RSHE, what was being taught in our schools. And even when I, as a constituent MP, went to see the schools, they would not show me the full curriculum. They'd show me a summary, but not the material. And when I started investigating the material, I was quite flabbergasted. Primary school, learning about masturbation. I don't want my child learning about masturbation in primary school. You know, they'll find out as they get older, learning that you can change gender. Learning about gay sex and straight sex. I don't want my child knowing about sex full stop in primary school. I mean, I even visited a college the other day in Lincolnshire, and they had on their walls saying that sex doesn't, parents can be any gender, you can give birth any gender. But again, even college students, I don't want them thinking of having sex and children while they're at college. So I think the whole system is broken, actually. They should be there to learn to, the subject's not about having children while they're at college. But back to the DFE, when I gave my experience at our weekly board meeting, I said, look, parents, you mentioned parents have got the right, they have got the right, but certain schools are still blocking. Certain head teachers are still blocking, certain teachers are still blocking parents having this information. And I said to the Secretary of State at the time, we must allow all children, and we must publish what children are being taught in schools. But do you know, then I got sacked by Rishi for not backing him for leadership, so I couldn't push on with...
That's a badge of honor, Andrea.
It certainly is, as you know. But my whole point is, even to this day, that material's not being published by the DFE. And my issue is, what is deeply concerning is the RSHE, so that's relationship, sex education for children, health and sex education, it got pushed through during COVID, where MPs were voting remotely and there was no scrutiny whatsoever. And added to that, we had our longest serving schools minister with the Conservatives. He was closely aligned with Stonewall. He was closely aligned with these transgender charities. He was even in Hansard talking about one in his constituency. And it was him who ensured that this was brought into schools. And to me, that's not conservative. And this is something that, as former Conservatives like Kane as well, we've been fighting back for far too long.
Indeed, and you're so right, Andrea. Now Stephen, you are an MEP from Croatia. Now, can you give us sort of a European perspective? Because this isn't just happening in the UK, this is happening all over, but particularly in the Eastern Bloc, you guys have actually defended your children. You've defended the values of Christianity and Western values very, very well. Now, tell us a little bit about how you guys have done that, but also what you are doing personally as well, because I think the audience will be interested.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to first thank CPAC and Liz Truss for the kind invitation. Delighted to be here in London with you all. Yes, I come from Croatia, a country that suffered for decades under communism. The communists also were deliberately in charge of the indoctrination of children. That's what they did from the very beginning. And so parents need to be awake. There's something very insidious and dangerous going on, starting with first grade, even kindergarten in some countries. So in Croatia, before my life in politics, was teaching at university, and I entered the public square in 2013 when we had a national vote, a national referendum on defining marriage in the Constitution of Croatia. We had just entered the European Union, and we were aware, I would say, that Brussels and the machine of the European Union was, you know, promoting, imposing, if you will, this new kind of orthodoxy that we didn't want, and that in many ways is hostile to Christian culture. So we launched a petition drive, collected enough signatures, forced a hostile government to hold this referendum, and thankfully 2-1, the Croatian people voted to define marriage as a union between one man and one woman. So it is protected in our Constitution. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. I say this because culture matters. We talked at these events a lot about defending our borders, about the consequences of mass migration, about free speech, but we need to talk about our children and the society they will be growing up in. In many ways, it's not a friendly society to them. I would say much of what's being taught that's been mentioned is a form of abuse to young children. If they're exposed to this kind of content at an early age, it's abusive. It's at least emotional abuse. So I speak more as a parent today on this stage, a father of 4, who takes this very seriously. I think parental rights is becoming more and more of an issue. We do have a natural right to raise our children and to know what is being taught in schools. I agree with this description that radicals have entered this space that we have, in a way, abandoned. And so we should be paying attention to what's happening in education. You know, when there's a conservative government, the education minister post usually isn't the most coveted, but I would argue in many ways it's the most important. It's the most important, and the left understands this. And so that's why they have an advantage, a head start, when it comes to politics. And frankly, some of these ideas are so nonsensical that they cannot spread in society without indoctrination. You know, parents are not attracted to gender theory. They know the difference between boys and girls. We all know this. So unless it's imposed in this kind of artificial way, the left knows very well that it will slowly disappear. In Croatia, in many parts of Central and Eastern Europe, we are fighting back. There is still a lot of common sense and willingness to fight. I will just close by saying that these decades of suffering under communism, many anonymous people really heroically suffering under this brutal system, today is a source of strength for many who are inspired by this and will not yield, you know, to this madness. We're dealing with not just, you know, another political debate between the right and the left. This is a kind of madness that we're facing, and people have to speak up while we still can. In the European Union, they're not interested in our right to free speech. They would prefer to cancel us, to censor us, and there's many ways that they're doing this. I see this on a daily basis as a MEP. So I'm happy that this panel is taking place because I do agree it's one of the most important ones here at CPAC.
Thank you so much. Now I want to move on slightly to the actual education system in the United Kingdom and how we reform the system, because at the moment, it isn't really working for parents, as we've heard, but it also isn't working for young people. It's not teaching young people for life. It's not giving them and equipping them the skills to go out there, make their own business, make wealth, and actually make something of themselves, and not just having to go to university because Mr. Blair told you so. That's the problem with this country. So, Andrea, I want to go to you on this because you were doing some fantastic work in Lincolnshire. Andrea is a fantastic mayor, and can we all give Andrea a round of applause for all she's doing?
I'll come again, thank you.
But Andrea, please tell us a little bit about what you are doing in Lincolnshire and also how you think we can improve, particularly on skills and apprenticeships in this country.
I mean, when I was briefly the skills minister, I wanted to turn our system in the UK to more like one in Germany, where it's a parity of esteem between vocational, technical trades. And that's what I'm trying to do on a microcosm in our region of Lincolnshire. We've identified a site, and we are working on opening the largest trades, advanced manufacturing, AI and coding college in the UK. Because I think long gone are we as a society where we've got to push people down the university route. We know why Blair did it. He wanted to fix the employment figures to make it look better by putting people in university. But I think it's actually a cruel thing to do to, there's so many degrees out there to which are not worth the paper they're written on. And when I was the when I was the university's skills minister, I provocatively said, I want to end Harry Potter degrees. I mean, even though there's not Harry Potter degrees, I was being provocative to say there's so many useless degrees out there. They've got to be actually, we've got to have a skills and educational system what children out for life. And at the moment, it does not do that. So that's one area that I'm doing. Another thing I'm doing on a personal level, watch this space. I'm not giving too much away, but I'm over the coming weeks, you'll see some announcements of me challenging the education system. Because, look, I've got a 9-year-old boy, and even when I was at school, I think it was broken as well. It's got even worse now. Children sit for 6 hours at school, a rote-style way of being taught, having to listen to a teacher for 6 hours, and it's memorization techniques. It's a factory model where we are dumbing people down, their intelligence, their free thinking. So we've got to challenge that. You know, I'd like a school and an education system where children have got free thinking, we produce future leaders, we see those individual magic about each child and help them fulfill their full potential. This is what the education should be about, not to dumb children down.
100%. Thank you, Andrea. Now, Becky, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about this because, you know, particularly what we've seen at the moment, this Labour government has had a real bad and terrible attitude towards particularly choice in education. You know, we've seen Bridget Phillipson, that class warrior, who has, quite frankly, gone after private schools because they hate choice. That is what socialists hate. They hate you having the choice to send your children to school.
And they come after grammar schools next.
Exactly.
Sure they will.
Exactly that. So, Becky, talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Well, yes, obviously everyone in here knows that we have one of the most diverse systems of education. We have so many options of different types of schools. I was state educated in a grammar school, but of course we have so many variations of private school, but also different kinds of state school. And so I think that what we really need to do to protect our children from a sort of overly interested leftist state is make sure that that choice is available to as many people as possible. And obviously what's happened since the last Labour government's come in is we've had the VAT added on to private schools, and this has been a disaster, not just for individual private schools, but for lots of individual parents who've tried so hard to create the best atmosphere for their own child in whichever school is their local school. And I think that we have to keep remembering that freedom of choice, I mean, lots of people, by the way, are also choosing homeschooling now. I have spoken to 4 people already today who have decided to homeschool their children. And this is a growing movement. It already exists.
Can I just come in on that point? In Greater Lincolnshire alone, there's 2,500 parents who homeschool their pupils.
And you know, so I'm speaking to parents all the time who are saying there are no schools near me that I would trust for my child's education. I mean, not only is this a terrible state of mind to find ourselves in 2026 in the UK, but it is also something that makes you remember the importance of choice in schools. You know, we need a voucher system where people can get the chance to choose different schools. And of course, that would make sure that people who chose the schools that were doing things that weren't woke, that were teaching properly and teaching exams properly, would get the right numbers of people. And failing rubbishy schools would be deserted. Instead of which, we've got the opposite system. The Labour government's trying to destroy the great choice that we have in this country, which is, I would argue, one of the greatest exports that we currently have. I mean, our education system is still, as Liz Truss said earlier this morning, it's one of the things that the last Conservative government did succeed in. Better results in maths, better results in literacy. But still, if this is the best thing that's happened in this country for the last 30 years, it's still going wrong. So we have a huge amount to learn. And I would actually argue, just slightly contrary to what you were saying, I actually think that the progressive view of child-centric teaching is not necessarily always helpful for most children. I understand what you mean about not rote learning, but I think there's many pieces of evidence that teachers teaching and children learning is the most effective way.
However, teachers have got to, you've got to look kinesthetically, learn by doing as well. We've got to develop a stronger model where that's concerned.
Definitely, and I think what we all agree on is it's all about choice.
Yeah.
It's all about choice. Now, I want to move on slightly as well, because this is about the brainwashing of our children. And I've spoken previously at a conference, this Conservative Democratic Organisation, where I spoke about how I believe that my generation, Gen Z, but also the millennials, I would say, are the most intolerant generation in history. They are people who celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk and also mourn the death of the Ayatollah. Now, how have we got to this situation in our country, in the Western world, where young people think that that is okay? That is not okay. We've got to find out why it is that these young people believe this, and actually tell them and support them and say it's okay, you don't have to go along with the groupthink. That's the problem. But, you know, I think many of us will have had friends and, you know, other people sort of distance themselves from us because of our views, because of our values. Many of you outside here in the audience today will know that feeling. I know it. I have been told that I cannot go on holiday with a group of friends because I joined Reform UK. I have been told that because I believe a man is a man and a woman is a woman, that they do not want to be friends with me anymore. That is how crazy this generation is that fact and truth doesn't seem to play in to their way of thinking. Now that is scary. So, but I will say this. I do think Gen Z offer us a glimmer of hope. Because in this country, outside of the M25, outside of London and outside of the university cities of Bristol and other places, there are millions of young people who come from places like where I come from, places like Sittingbourne in Kent, North Kent, who didn't go to university, who got an apprenticeship, who became an electrician or a hairdresser, and they care about the same things that we care about. So what we have to do, all of us, is find these people, speak to them, and say, it's okay, you can think like us, because this is normal, this is what we should be fighting for. Now, guys, what do you think on the whole Generation Z situation? Stephen, from Croatia, young people in your country in particularly, I think are very much more connected to God and Christianity. Do you think that plays a role?
Certainly. I want to say that it was very appropriate to begin this morning with a prayer. We had a priest on stage. I think I want to congratulate CPAC for doing that. We have to bring God back into the public space. If we neglect God, we will pay the price. I think there's mountains of evidence for that. The reality again, culture matters, politics is downstream from culture, and culture is defined, whether we like it or not, by religion. In the West, it's Christianity. That's what we're talking about. That's what really created the West as such, as a distinct civilization. And we have to be aware that human nature requires a connection with the transcendent. So in other words, we're programmed in a way that we will, whether we like it or not, have a religious outlet. And the question is whether we will worship the true God, the true religion, or not, or worship idols. Woke, in a way, is a substitute religion. It's trying to fill this void. In the European Parliament, these are not normal political debates. I feel more like I'm facing a, fanatical person who has this, zealous view and wants to basically crush me as a heretic. We're all heretics in kind of this leftist, wokist view of reality. And so it comes down to religion. A famous English historian, Christopher Dawson, wrote very, very eloquently on this, that we cannot understand culture without this relationship that religion has and the role it has in informing our lives. And in the end, when we talk about morality, what's right and wrong, we can't give children the neutral answer, well, you'll decide as you go along. Children, want an answer. They want clarity. They want to hear what is right and wrong. And this is our responsibility. And we can't allow, as parents, for the state to assume this responsibility. It's our responsibility. These children will believe something. They will not just remain a blank slate. And in my view, it should be, Christian morality. That's what created our country. That's what we should be proud of, not ashamed of, proud of. And, I come from a family. I have 2 younger brothers who are Catholic priests. And they're serving in their own way. And, we should take pride in this. I think the educational system, this instilling of guilt, and erasing our memory, this is very dangerous. And, why should, at the end of the day, migrants who come into our societies respect us if we don't respect ourselves? I mean, it's just common sense.
Very true. Very, very true.
It's
Becky, please.
No, I was just going to say it's so true, and of course, we are all effectively in the position, as the Jesuits used to say, give me a child until the 7 and I'll give you a Catholic for life. I mean, we are as parents able to give the values that we need to our children, and we have to remember it's us primarily that are responsible. And although this panel is about education, of course, education starts in the home, and those early years are so crucial. We all very much feel that, and I think we have to remind ourselves of it every day.
Andrea, would you like to?
No, I mean, I completely agree with both of you. But if I can just sort of give an example, really, how the Labour government is actually, on one hand, saying publicly they're giving more power to the regions, but on another hand, they're taking it away. Now, we've got 6 million adults in England who are illiterate. I mean, isn't that a shocking stain on the Conservatives' history? And in Greater Lincolnshire, we spend money on ESOL, English as a foreign language. And what I say, people come over on boats. They all have mobile phones. Use a language app. It shouldn't be British taxpayers paying for this. So what I've done, I've removed ESOL funding, and instead, with FE, HE, and industry, we are designing a new qualification, which is literacy, which is actually linked to economic outcomes and finding people job to break that cycle of worklessness. Because I think that's the kinder thing to do, actually. But we found out this week, and I think this is probably the civil servants rushing it through before they get the new Prime Minister. What has come is that we are not allowed to have that autonomy to be able to have this Lincolnshire People First policy. And isn't that wrong? To me, we should always be putting the British taxpayer first. Yeah, we've got to be a fair society. True, genuine refugees in war-torn countries will help them, but it's about British people first. Our own society, we have been back of the queue, and that's got to end.
Yeah. 100%. Now we're closing up on our panel now, and I just want everyone to say a quick word about if there's one thing you think we can do to stop the brainwashing of our children, what is the one thing that the audience can take away that they can do to help?
Oh, this is so easy. Take this object away from your child and don't give it back. Ideally, tell them never to get it again. This is too easy.
I disagree with that.
It's the easiest thing in the world to do. There are flip phones if you really want to keep in touch with your child. Both my older children gave up their phones. They have flip phones. I think they're in the audience. They know it makes a difference. It's life-changing. I didn't have a phone till I was 27. I survived perfectly fine. I managed to go interrailing without needing one. We are delusional to think we need these things for our children. They are creating the leftist problem that we've all been talking about.
No, but I mean, phones maybe, but like iPads and everything, I like to see them used in education. And also, my little one's got one. Because do you know something? If all children are being taught a certain way, the left-wing indoctrination that we discussed, by us giving our children the access to other stuff out there, it's got to be, obviously, we monitor it. They see that they can challenge the system. And I'll just give a silly example, really. My 9-year-old son, Clifford, I played Father Ted and also Little Britain to him a few days ago. And you know, he laughed his head off. He was really giggling. It was wonderful. And he said, "Mummy, why don't we laugh like that anymore?" And I said, look, unfortunately, you can't necessarily show this in schools at the moment, but we've lost that sense of humour. And how do people as a society get on and make friends is by laughter, isn't it, really? And so I think the thing we can do as parents is actually teach our children to challenge. Because what they learn at the home is important. The state should not parent. Parents should parent.
If I could, just one comment. Saint Mother Teresa once said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And I think there's a deep wisdom in that. We have to have conversations with our children, spend time with them. There's nothing more important
100%.
that you can do.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to everyone here at CPAC. Thank you so much. Thank you.